we came together at a time in the city when unemployment was running out, SNAP benefits were being decreased from the maximum, our city feeding program was running out, and also a lot of mutual aid initiatives that had started in the beginning of pandemic hadn't planned for this to last as long as it had. So a lot of them were running out of funding or just like becoming kind of obsolete in their operations or trying to pivot, word of the year, and move to different operations. So we just really tried to address that gap in the food systems network. And we were inspired by movements in New York and Los Angeles. And what's been cool is we've also been able to kind of like foster an environment for other cities that have wanted to have their own fridge movement. So yeah, each city, it's been really cool to see how each city has adapted it to be authentic to its own city. And in New Orleans, we've done that in different ways of adorning our shelters. We've been able to compensate BIPOC artists with a livable wage as well as pay for supplies. We have had like a weirdly like thinking it was active but not active hurricane season. But since we did start in July, we knew that we would have to build weatherproof shelters. So as you can see behind me, all of our fridges are equipped with like drainage roofs. Some of them have rain barrows, some of them have compost stations next to them. We've also been able to compensate BIPOC chefs that have lost their jobs from the pandemic in the service industry to fill in time slots, weekly time slots to stock the fridges. And something that was really cool was at the beginning of the pandemic in New Orleans, a lot of distilleries had switched over and started producing hand sanitizers. So we've got hand sanitizer at every fridge, and we've gotten those donated from local distilleries. So it's been really cool to see how New Orleans has transformed this national fridge movement into something that's uniquely ours.
Wow, that's so rad. Thank you for telling us about it. I mean, it's really cool to see just the incredible operation that your community has built together, right? Through, yes, many ecological and socioeconomic struggles we face, in addition to more this year. So thank you for that introduction. Excited to see some of those fridges later, and talk more. And putting a pin to talk a little bit about funding if we have the time later, monetary sources, because I know that's an important piece of this work. So sweet. Thank you, Bryn. We're going to pass it to Lilith to talk a little bit about the birth of the Birmingham Free Store.
Hey, y'all. Like Sav said, I'm Lilith. So the Birmingham Free Store is like what it says on the can. It's a store where everything is free. And this idea has been around for a really long time. The very first store that was, I mean, obviously, like the idea of gathering things in a centralized location and like giving them out for free within a community has literally been a part of human culture for forever. But like a free store, the first one that started that we have modeled a lot of what we do off of, is an anarchist organization from San Francisco in the 60s called the Diggers. And they did lots of things. Like they had a whole free network of things that they called Free City, where they had like a free clinic and like a free bank and free car repair and free stores like in a bunch of neighborhoods. And I had just been reading about that, and I was interested in how simple of an idea it was, yet it like very like precisely and quickly and starkly kind of illustrated the fallacies in capitalism like really immediately, because like it's just a store where everything is free. You like want that can exist and like once a store where everything is free can exist, why do all these other stores where commodities are being kept from you, like why do those need to exist? So it's both like trying to meet people's immediate material needs and also like making people think about and question like what this economy has to look like and what alternative economies can look like. So yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways it is theatrical and it is a joke, you know, like it's and it makes people who are really committed to the dream of capitalism really angry. Um, but so we began with pop-ups in Lynn Park, which is where we would like gather all kinds of donations, clothes, books, shoes, home goods, food. Uh, and then we would bring it all to Lynn Park once a month, set it all up like a store, let people take whatever they needed until it was gone. We did that every month for like 4 or 5 months before it was, for a lot of reasons, which I can get into later, we decided to pivot towards wanting like a building. We got a building in North Birmingham in like early 2019. Then we had that building for about 5 months. It went amazing. Like I still think about how much I love that old building. Um, and then due to landlord negligence, our roof caved in, and the store flooded. Um, and like we had to break the lease and stuff. Almost everything was destroyed. There was not a lot that we could even save. And it took us a really, really long time to find a new space. Because, landlords just aren't that comfortable with renting to a business or whatever they think we are that doesn't make any money. So yeah, it took us a really long time, like about a year, to even find a new space. We eventually gained a fiscal sponsor in the Yellowhammer Fund. And so with their kind of economic power, like, they're a larger nonprofit. We are not a nonprofit. We don't really want to be. They were able to get us into a building, and we've been there for since March of 2020. And that's the front of the building. um that's what it looks like. Yeah, we've been there since March of 2020, and things are really hard, like with COVID, to figure out how like we should even operate something like this, but we have figured out a lot of things, which again, like if you're interested in the specifics, I can talk about that later, that really work for us. And I'm really proud of how it's operating at the moment. I think it's really great. We have lots of people who have transitioned from being shoppers to being like really integral like roles at the store. I feel like the community really feels ownership over the space, which is something that was very important to us. And we have lots of just like smaller programs. Like you can see, we have a free food pantry called the People's Pantry. There's a front view of it. We will eventually have a community fridge as well, like around this corner. It's currently being painted. So that should be up, like, I don't know exactly when, but it'll be up at some point. And we have a garden bed along the side right here. And this is the winter garden, so it's obviously like a little bit piddly right now. But yeah, that's about 40 feet of growing space, and we get a lot of food out of it. It has drip line throughout it. It was built by like a local like gardening company, like local to Weston, called We Grow 77, and they're fantastic. And then behind us, we have an abandoned lot that we're trying to reclaim for the people, and make it into like a community garden, into a green space. We're cleaning it up really slowly. You can see we put a bird bath there. We've planted some trees there. And we have a lot of hopes for it that I'll probably talk about more later on. But yeah, that's us. That's the Free Store.
Wow. Thank you, Lilith. Really, really appreciate how grounded your work is in, historical examples, right? And principles, and how you're trying to live through them, especially through community ownership. And we definitely see that so much and excited to explore that more in your work. So thank you. All right. Now we're going to pass it to Majadi with Dynamite Hill Community Land Trust. Thank you, Majadi.
All right. How are you all doing this evening? Sending you all many blessings from the Dynamite Hill Smithfield Community Land Trust. So I'm Reverend Majadi Baruti. I'm the co-director of the Dynamite Hill Smithfield Community Land Trust. I work along with our founder and what we refer to as our visionary, Miss Susan Diane Mitchell. We were incorporated as a nonprofit in 2016. And I have a joke. I say, we haven't really behaved like one since. What I mean, though, is that our work has been about a lot of sharing. It's not charity. We've never had a construct like that at all. A lot of giving, a lot of giving, and a lot of giving and sharing with our neighbors. So our organization works towards permanently affordable housing for all. We have a strong move towards popular education on the history of Black and Indigenous land struggle and the history of this amazing area, the historic Smithfield community in Birmingham, Alabama. If you have an opportunity to study this area, it is full of all types of pushbacks against systems of oppression and really, from my estimation, a greater majority of the civil rights struggle in Birmingham, Alabama should be, the discussion should be centered here. And we try to make sure people have that understanding. We have been doing some recording of some of the elders in the community and some of the amazing stuff that they do, which some of that actually includes a mutual aid dynamic. Food sovereignty has been a primary focus of ours for a few years now. We've traditionally behaved as a mutual aid organization with our community prior to COVID-19, with our community due to some of the needs of the elders as well as the children. We do a lot of sharing, a lot of advocacy work around making sure that everybody has everything that they need, because from our position, there is abundance on the planet. The planet is not in lack. We're really not in lack. People may be existing in states of poverty and what's called concentrated poverty in some areas in Birmingham and in Alabama. We understand that to be a truth, but really the planet, the earth, there is plenty for everybody. So we share food we grow. We've shared it with elders and friends and family. Seeds, we help the elders to make sure that they have what they need, sometimes giving a call, sometimes just dropping off bags of food. We do work hand in hand with Birmingham Mutual Aid as well. We do a lot of work. A lot of our mutual aid work is in organizing volunteers to be in various spaces for cleanups in the community. And so for me personally, I grew up like this in Chicago. This was not something that a mutual aid was not something that it was a foreign idea to me or something that I had to learn. It's how we grew up. So I'm going to date myself. I was born in August 22nd, 1969. And the area that I grew up in, everyone shared something with one another. We shared food. We shared what were called food stamps. Now they're referred to as the EBT card. We shared clothing literally with one another. So what would happen is one day, some family in the community would not have something that they would need. And so everybody in the community would come together to make sure they did. We also had a thing that I remember these, they call them blue light parties or rent parties. You'll find old movies from the 70s, the 1970s, Black movies, like a movie called Coolie High, where they would have a rent party. When basically what would happen is everyone would come to someone's home to help to pay the rent, and they would all contribute $1 or a couple of dollars, and that money would go towards that person to make sure that they did not become evicted. And this kind of sharing, food, resources, money, that was a normal process for me. So seeing what would take place with COVID and this type of thing, and even before that, it is, to my understanding, that this is the natural impetus for humans. This kind of self-centeredness that we have, sometimes we exhibit in different isms, and in any of the isms, you can exhibit that. You know what I mean when I say the political isms? That's not the natural. I mean, Psychology Today, the magazine, years ago, actually did an article saying that the natural human impetus is towards sharing. I grew up on Sesame Street, so I learned how to share. It's a natural part of who I am, and my mother taught it. My Aunt Pat, who grew food in the alley, in the little patchy grass. She was the first introduction to farming and one of my first introductions to the concept of mutual aid. She was always carrying bags of clothes and whatnot. And then people would bring her things when she would need things. So it was a rounded construct. It wasn't like charity is like this top down dynamic. Well, you know, if your whole community is poor, so there's no top and there's no down. Everybody's poor. So we're all gonna make sure, but we're not gonna let any child go hungry, and nobody's gonna go unclothed. And nobody's gonna go unhoused. I mean, we've had people live with us, and we're like, who is that? Who is that? Because they had no place to stay. You just let them in, and that's and there's something to the African ethos as well that ties into this construct. We came into the United States like that. It's not new, you know, it's not a political thing for us. It's just that's what we are as Africans. So
wow, thank you so much. Goodness, it's so much I want to highlight from that. Thank you for connecting that to your personal history and the history of both your community in Dynamite Hill, and also like a larger African ethos, as you say. It's really very grateful that you highlighted the fact that mutual aid is not just something that you slap on something, right? It's a formal term, right? But people are doing that all the time, especially in low-income communities, right? And it's not named, but it's still real. So thank you so much for saying that and for bringing that to light. Excited to dig in deeper. And yes, thank you also for recording stories of elders, so we can continue remembering these traditions. So we're gonna share next, or we're gonna hear next from Penny from Birmingham Mutual Aid. Penny, please, if you will.
Okay. First, is everybody's cameras off on purpose? Like, I feel really sad that I can't see so many beautiful faces that I can like react to and they can react to me. It's okay if everybody doesn't want their camera on, but this is like my small call to invitation to come hang out with all of us.
The action.
Yeah, just come be in gallery view with everyone, see everybody's faces, like we can all do snaps at each other. I'm really community oriented, so like talking in what feels like a vacuum is very difficult. Okay, enough of that. I'm Penny. I'm she, her. Before I get to Birmingham Mutual Aid, I guess I'll give like a really quick why mutual aid. Mutual aid is pretty integral to my life and has been for a really long time. As a person who has lived in an intentional community on and off for, I don't know, like 8 years, and had been interested in intentional community prior to that. It's just kind of a way of being. So I think when COVID started and there was this movement away from, I guess, my intentional community, because we all kind of went our separate ways because we had no idea what COVID was and what was happening, and we were all living on top of each other. So we all kind of went our separate ways. And that gave me an opportunity, I guess, to turn that like community energy from inwards to like outwards. So that's kind of the very beginning of Birmingham Mutual Aid. Birmingham Mutual Aid started out as a spreadsheet where hopefully people were going to list their needs and other people were going to list the resources that they had. And they did that, but what I found is often when I would reach out to somebody who needed something, they hadn't been contacted by anybody else on the list. So all of a sudden, I was the conduit between these two things, people who had something to offer and people who had something that they needed. And so it became very clear that like direct action wasn't going to happen in that way. So So then it was like, all right, well, let's start a Facebook group. And I started kind of pulling together boxes from my pantry to feed people. And somehow we got, it's really hard to explain like how, what the heck happened. But at this point, essentially Birmingham Mutual Aid feeds between 75 and 95 people on any given week through our little free corner store. And the little free corner store, essentially, we send out what we call a menu each week. And it has everything broken out into like bakery, produce, pantry, dairy, meat, eggs. And the folks who are our food box friends go ahead and they fill that out and they return their grocery list to us, and we pack their food boxes and we deliver them to them, and this is all of it's free of charge. So that's one thing that we're what one food box turned into. We also do pop-ups, a couple different ones. So we do the little free closet, which is usually twice a month, and it happens both in, um, I guess I'll say my front yard, but Birmingham Mutual Aid operates out of Big Feelings Queer Collective, which is an intentional community here in Birmingham. So the little free closet happens in our front yard um, twice a month. And then we've started going with Be a Blessing Birmingham to Legion Field to start providing an experience for people to be able to shop for clothes that they need or want. And Be a Blessing Birmingham primarily serves folks who are experiencing homelessness. So there's that. Everything like just continues like springing out of like needs that you hear about, right? So it's like, oh, people are hungry, and then you hear that people that you're talking to are hungry, need clothes, and so you start doing clothes, and then you start looking around and you go like, wait, what's going on? Like, we're looking for resources for people who use drugs, and the only ones that there are either faith-based organizations or organizations that are strictly focused on rehabilitation. So we started doing harm reduction pop-ups because we didn't see that happening in Alabama. Well, actually, no, we didn't see that happening in Birmingham specifically. So at our harm reduction pop-ups, we both educate the public about why harm reduction is important, and we try to educate drug users on ways to use more safely and try to help them with that. And we provide as well like wound care kits and sexual health kits. So it's a lot of information sharing. We've had a lot of really good feedback from that. I think when we first started going out, I was really concerned that people who don't use drugs were really going to push back hard at us, saying like, no, lots of people use drugs, and probably you do too. I mean, you likely drink alcohol, and there shouldn't be a moral judgment around this. But in fact, people have been really, really supportive and have just said like, oh, this is really, really needed, and not enough people are talking about this. So that has been awesome, like really, really uplifting. So aside from the little free corner store and our closet and the harm reduction pop-ups, we also just kind of meet various needs as much as we can. If we hear there's a need, we try and meet it. So it's like, we hear somebody needs an air conditioner, and we try and find somebody who has an air conditioner they're not using or has money to go towards an air conditioner. We know somebody's car just got wrecked, and then we found somebody else who's trying to give a car away. And so we're like, okay, let's get that car to that person, and like, let's get the insurance paid and the registration paid so that they're all set up. Someone's about to be evicted. So how can we either keep them from getting evicted because there's damage to their apartment, like let's find somebody who can fix things so that their landlord's not pissed, or is it money that they need and can we find money? Like, can we get that from people? So it's kind of wild. I mean, there's everything from light to water to housing to I need a baby swing to it's a car, transportation. It's really all over the place. Masks. Um, so yeah, I don't know. That's what we're up to. Birmingham Mutual Aid.
Wow. Yes, class. Like, golly. I mean, I'm pretty blown away for real at the breadth of offerings that y'all provide to the community. And it's really cool to see the collaborations and the partnerships that you make, right? And it doesn't have to be a formal partnership. It's just showing up for each other, right? At the end of the day. So, right.
Okay, hold on.
What's up?
So we work so much with the Birmingham Free Store and with Dynamite Hill Smithfield Community Land Trust. And I don't know why I didn't just like, I'm going to be like, yeah, shout to them. So I'm sorry, y'all. Uh, and Fountain Heights Farms. And like, I mean, the sheer amount of like organizations that are doing things together in Birmingham in their own ways without having to have formal partnerships is pretty badass.
Oh yeah, retweet. You're right. And yeah, shout them out. We gotta, it's how we learn and how we can keep showing up if we know, right? So thank you for lifting up the names of the organizations present and those who aren't. Yeah, wow, golly, y'all. Okay, so we've thrown around this term mutual aid, right? And some of y'all have already touched a little bit on kind of the depth and history of that term, right? And we also want to make sure that we kind of get a shared understanding of what we mean, right? That we're not just carelessly throwing around mutual aid when we're not actually doing that, or when that's not actually what we mean. We want to be true to what we say. So I'm really interested if the panelists could give me like kind of a quick rundown of like, how do you see mutual aid? What does mutual aid mean to you? Or what is your definition of mutual aid? And then how does it differ from other forms of community work? So we're gonna stay with you, Penny, if you will, to give us kind of, your interpretation of mutual aid and how it's different than other forms of work. We're not in front of wonderful answers.
Okay. Mutual aid. Define mutual aid. I think it's not complicated. It's really human. It's really simple. It's recognizing that we all have something that we need, whether that's materially, emotionally, physically, socially, spiritually. And on the flip side of that, we all have something that we can offer to others. And the part of aid is just doing that, right? Is just like taking part in this stance of giving and receiving. So to me, that's what mutual aid is. It's really when you find out that your neighbor is sick and you show up with a thing of soup. I mean, it can be really complicated, right? Like you just heard us all list off these examples of things we're doing in it. Perhaps it sounds really grandiose and large, but it isn't. It really starts with just caring. So I think, to me, how it differs from charity work is that charity work or other work often seems like there's a wall between like us and them. And I feel like mutual aid work is working at smashing that wall, that there's not this idea of us and them, that we are recognizing that when we are participating in this work, whether giving or receiving, we are neither more than or less than based on how we are self-identified and societally identified. I think mutual aid has this like really core truth to it that we are inherently worthy, that we all deserve care no matter what our circumstances are, and that we are like better off when we are all cared for. So when I look at charity work, and to anybody on here who does nonprofit and charity work, like I'm not trying to knock what you're doing, just trying to explain what mutual aid is. Like we all have our parts to play. But with charity work, like I see a barrier between us and them. Like I'm the good person doing these good acts for you. Like, please, be grateful. And like, how dare you be ungrateful or, want to make a choice that's different than what I would dictate for you. And I think there's a lot of judgment as well about what people's life circumstances are or situations are, as if people choose to be hungry, or they choose to not have a house, or they choose to just essentially lived in a totally unjust world, a world that is unjust, but also purposely unjust and systematically set up to be unjust. And I think there's another thing, I think, with mutual aid, and the difference between charity and mutual aid work is like, we're not trying to convert anybody. I don't need you to believe what I believe in order for me to say like, yo, I think you should eat. Like, I don't need you to pray. I don't need you to read something. I don't need you to participate in a program. Like, all I need to know is that you're hungry. And yeah, I don't know. Hopefully that was a decent explanation of like why I feel like mutual aid is different work. I think you'll hear solidarity versus charity a lot. And the solidarity piece of it is like recognizing that that wall between giving and receiving is it's not real. It's an illusion, because we, like I said, we all have something we need, and we all have something to offer, and we're always in different parts of that dance, so.
Yeah. Thank you, Penny. Go off for real. Like, yes, so much that you said that I want to highlight, but I don't want to keep talking because we have so many wonderful panelists, but mwah, chef's kiss. Thank you. We're going to pass it to Reverend Majati, please. You've already kind of touched on it, on the difference between mutual aid and community work generally.
Yeah, just a little bit. And I think that the way that Penny laid that out, that differentiation of charity and that alleged social hierarchy that often charities have, that's really damaging. And I think that that's where, in my understanding of mutual aid, none of us can really exist in this space on the planet, if you will, without each other, even in, and this is going to sound odd, even in the way we are in contradiction to each other as humans. Our spiritual growth is being constantly defined, reshaped, moved as we engage each other, as we engage systems, and even as we engage dynamics of oppression. Now that's very metaphysical,
Yes.
But when we're talking about our mutuality, even in that construct, I will do my best, I'll just say it like that because I am human, for someone who is doing harm to others to just wither and die in hunger. I will try my best Now, I can get a little grimy and be like, you know what? Later for you, I'm gonna walk on over here. But in my understanding of a higher spiritual construct, not only is it for me in my human self and in my divine self, the sacred me, to make sure that everyone eats, that everyone is housed, that everyone has fresh water, that everyone is able to enjoy sunflowers, if you will.
Mm.
Um, m- m- my calling is towards that mutuality, that pull to connect us through that higher consciousness. And again, it's very difficult because I walk around in this body and I have those things and these systems that I dislike, that I have discord with, anger, all that kind of thing. But the higher calling is there.
Mm.
So this community work that we're doing. I grew up in Chicago, as I mentioned, but around, if you know Chicago and you understand the Black migrations, both northward and westward, people forget about the westward movement. Um, these folks, my folks, migrated from the South, from places like Arkansas, Tennessee, and the Black Belt in Alabama. It's my understanding from both how I was raised culturally, but also in some of my studies. I'm doing some historical studies on my roots in farming and in the South here, is that they would have done these things in a cooperative way. And so when I really understand that, I was like, I actually have a very difficult time thinking in terms of like, well, this is all about me. Of course, I
Mm.
have my ego because I am human and I am male. So there's that. Um, and but really, like, I'm not going to let you go hungry if I have the ability to feed you.
Mm.
If I have a bowl of soup, if I had a bowl of soup, how many people are on this call? It's like 20 something of us. If I have a bowl of bean soup, all 23 of us are going to be sharing a bean a piece, and we're going to all take a little sip of the broth. I'm not going to sit here and let Janet or Jason or Charles, uh, Sav. I'm just not gonna. You're gonna eat too. I don't even have. I have a difficult time even understanding how people live like that, like just kind of like just crapping on people like whatever. To heck with you. No, we gonna all eat this bean soup today, baby. We all getting some of it. So I get into this whole sharing is caring thing. I talk to children like that. Sharing is caring. Remember, sharing is caring. And again, I made fun of the Sesame Street thing, but seriously, if you study people's critiques of Sesame Street, they called it communist. It was like viewed as communist. And there's literally a video, you can find it on YouTube, of Big Bird singing a song about cooperation.
Mm.
And he keeps saying co-op, co-op, cooperation. And you hear that little co-op, he's talking about co-ops. You see they throw that little slider in on you, you know what I'm saying? Like, okay, I see you over there, Big Bird. All right, man, you my man, right? Coming through. He's 6 years old, people. Let's let's consider this. 6-year-olds have a clearer understanding of mutual aid and sharing than grown folks do.
Mm. Mm.
I mean, it's like that complex. Like, yeah, you can play with me. Come on, let's go. And so we have to get back to these very basic constructs. And like I said, they do go back into African cosmology, spirituality, and ways of being, Ubuntu, and other dynamics. We have a concept in ancient East Africa called Ma'at, which deals with balance and order and harmony and these types of things. This is the way we need to be living. That's why that mutual aid construct wasn't difficult for me. I mean, once I saw Birmingham Mutual Aid and what Penny and them were doing, and we were already in that vibration, I was like, oh, we supposed to work together, duh. So it's really not complex. We make it more complex and political than it really has to be. It's really about the heart. It really is.
Yes. Wow. Yes, you said that. Honestly, like the way that you connect, like the connection between your work and your values and ancestry and spirituality is just so, it's felt very strongly. And like, I appreciate that you don't overcomplicate at the same time, right? It's still easy to catch, right? So thank you for offering both the nuance and the simplicity of this work. Thank you.
Blessings.
Yes, Lilith, please tell us about mutual aid in your eyes.
Hey, it's always hard to follow Majadi. He's a very good speaker. First, let me just say if I'm sorry I had to dip out for a second, or if I've seemed not present for just a couple minutes. Something really weird just happened that I think relates to mutual aid in a really interesting way. So a lot of people like who are regulars at the store have my phone number and like call me and whatever. So I just got like 3 phone calls in a row. And I was like, okay, this might be an emergency. So I went to answer it, and they told me that somebody was stealing stuff out of the back of the store. And it was my roommate, Adora, loading boxes of extra groceries into my car to take to Penny's house for Birmingham Mutual Aid. That's what they saw. So people don't even know what sharing looks like and are very suspicious of anyone doing anything that falls outside the realm of capitalism, I guess. But yeah, so that's why I was like texting really fast. But so yeah, that I thought that was really funny.
Live in action here.
But so I think like for me, mutual aid is just this idea that resources and abundance already exist, and they are within our reach, and like all we really have to do is make the decision to care for one another in a way that is real and views each other as human beings, which like capitalism seeks to isolate us, and it's almost like a hard first step to really like view the people around you as human beings, who are like individual people. But once you do, like, you can make the decision, and we can make the decision collectively, that instead of like, this idea is drilled into our brains that if you help someone with anything, that will somehow put you behind in this rat race, because we all are living lives of scarcity all the time, most of us. But you know, once you realize that really it's better if we all get somewhere, and that helping someone's not going to hinder you in any way. In fact, it is integral, absolutely integral to your own survival and to the survival of a community, that we're able to support each other. And it's different than like a lot of other work, in a lot of ways. I think like it's very open to like the needs of other people. It's very like choice centered. It doesn't assume anyone's need. Like the idea people can assess their own needs for themselves, and we should just be there to listen, and just to meet them the best that we can. Yeah, I would say that's my definition of mutual aid.
Yes, yes, yes. Wow, that is truly wild that stealing from a free store is a concept. But yeah, wow. Yeah, people know what they need. Our community knows what they need. We just have to listen. Direct quote, just wonderfully said, Lilith. Thank you. And Bryn, please share with us.
So I think as communities in the Gulf South, we're used to like rallying together after storms to pick up the pieces. We have like a lot of Southern camaraderie. You know, there's like barbecues or crawfish boils that your neighbors come over and you're like not asking them to pitch in and all. And like all of these things are mutual aid without the label of mutual aid being on them. And talking about the blue light parties of Chicago, it reminds me, if anyone has seen a New Orleans Second Line, those actually started as social aid and pleasure clubs for freed slaves to provide housing or insurance or any type of like payment, medical bills, or any like gap in payments or any like type of financial or social aid that was needed. That's how New Orleans Second Lines, which are now commodified, came to be. So I think that those types of initiatives exist just inherently in communities. It's something, it's this like thing in humanity that we all owe each other. And like being raised in the Gulf South, we see that like aid and assistance doesn't necessarily get to us as fast as it needs to. It's very bureaucratic. There's so many like checkpoints and paperwork, and this person has to authorize it for this one for it to go through and for this one to get funds and all of these things. So with mutual aid, we're better able to directly assist our communities in need. So for the givers, there's no requirements. You don't have to meet this certain level of like hierarchy, be on a board to be able to donate directly to your community. And for receivers, there's no checkpoints, there's no required fields. Like every single checkpoint and required field is a barrier for people to to access those benefits that they could need. So it's these greater efforts, but it's also like passing on your baby clothes or your car seats when you're done with them. That's something that we all talked about the other day whenever we were all with each other. Like mutual aid is also one-to-one. It's also like something that you can give directly, whereas something like charity is very transactional. It's very, you have to be X to receive Y. So mutual aid is like less of a business transaction. It feels like you're able, especially now, like with coronavirus, where we're all disconnected from everyone, like mutual aid, it's like putting food in the fridge. You're able to sometimes even like see the folks that are coming up to directly receive them. So just like with where we're all feeling disconnected these days, I think mutual aid is just like providing another level that we can like try to get into this ethos of like all being a part of humanity.
Yes, goodness. I love that common thread of just sharing and taking care of each other as a community, as just like being part of who we are as humans, right? Oh, that feels so true. And the fact that what you're saying is that mutual aid is simple. It doesn't have to be overly bureaucratized. It doesn't have to be transactional. We can just share. We can just make sure folks' needs are met, and not just basic needs, but things like beauty, which I would say is a need as well. Like going back to kind of what Majadi was saying, right? We can do it, right? And that's just, I really got so much love for y'all for doing it and staying so true to those values and principles that you all just discussed. Because it is easy to lose that in community work. So, such wonderful stories that have been shared so far. I want to make sure that we have time to have a little bit of audience questions, if there are any. So I'm just going to ask one more question to y'all, and then hopefully we'll have about 5 minutes if there are questions from the audience. So I'm going to throw it to, let's see, Majadi next, so you know it's coming. But this one is about recognizing, so, I'm from Gadsden, right? It's not the city, but as y'all have said, there is mutual aid work happening, everywhere all the time, right? And it has been happening. And, we want to acknowledge that, that includes in rural communities as well. So this question is, what advice would you have for someone, whether based in the city or in the country? What advice would you have for someone wanting to get started on a mutual aid project? And, this is something I kind of wanted to put a pin in as well. If you could talk a little bit about, financial support in whatever form that takes, where does that come from? I'm sure there's some obvious answers there, but maybe more the nuts and bolts of that. As well as getting volunteers and getting people, like how does the actual kind of logistics work? If you want to touch on that, that's cool. If not, just kind of focusing on, advice for someone interested in getting involved. So Reverend Majadi, please, if you will.
Okay. really the first thing is to really understand the commonality of our humanity. We eat, sleep, drink. You know, we may not do those things in the exact same ways. There will be um, difference differences there, but that's the first thing. And I'm always going to come from this kind of spiritual vibration. I think that's natural for me, obviously, but the first understanding is that we are all human, and what is it that I need for my well-being? More than likely, my community, my planet that I share with 7 billion knuckleheads. Because despite what we think, none of us have a clue or a dollar to buy one with. We're just walking around, just we don't know what the hell we're doing. Okay. um, all 7 billion of us have these commonalities: the need for food, water, clothing, you know, covering for our bodies, covering for our heads. And the covering for our bodies, obviously, they can go a couple of different ways, but the covering for our head to protect us from the physical elements. Um, and understanding that in the communal setting, like in your immediate setting, once you get that, then you can just simply go and talk to your neighbors, get to know them. And of course, in a rural setting, that may be a little bit further apart. So you'll have to do a little bit more work there. But really, even in urbanity, we're kind of far apart. There's some that takes another dimension, but we're kind of far apart. But getting to know your folks where you are. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee back in the day, the SNCC as they are called, they would literally walk through communities and sit on the porch with the family and eat the collard greens, sip the lemonade, and talk. And just by that conversation and being human, the information on what the person needs comes out. You don't have to do a survey because that gets weird. You don't want to do a survey. And what happens is people start speaking out. You know, the proverbial closed mouth doesn't get fed thing. Well, we're gonna try to eat. We're gonna figure it out some kind of way, how to eat. So we will speak. Um, but taking out of it, and this is probably the most difficult part for us, those of us who are privileged, who lived in some form of privileged construct. I, the human male, the man, my privilege as man, as male, um, and how I go about through the planet, I may perceive, you know, I have to be mindful all the time of receiving um, people who are not me, and seeing my and knowing my privilege in that construct, and understanding that I'm not speaking downward, I'm speaking across. It is that we may have different language, and to listen, and you will find out what people want and what people need and what people desire. Um, just really being very open to what's around you. I mean, we grow sunflowers here at my at our home here at the top of Dynamite Hill. We grow sunflowers. The sunflowers will speak to you if you just listen. Trust me, they tell you a lot of stuff, telling people's business. I mean, they just they do a lot of talking. um, the trees, and still, you know, even in that construct, you still got to make a judgment as to what's the value here and that type of thing, and where your heart is in this. Um, but yeah, a lot of listening, and in the rural areas, the technicality of moving about. But I encourage you, because SNCC did it. You know, Student Nonviolent Coordinated Committee, they walked miles to be with folks, to ask them what they need, and then do the best that they could to provide. And they would get something out of it too. Real brief, with SNCC, these were young people, young Black folks, who were organizing from well-to-do families in the East and in the Northeast. And they came down here to rural South Black Alabama in the Black Belt. Guess who got their butts out of jail when they went to jail? The black farmers. The black farmers will put their house up to get these little kids, these little stupid kids, and oh, we got to vote, all this. They thought, they weren't gonna come down here and just engage these racist sheriffs and the KKK all like that. It was these black farmers that helped them to be able to organize, and so there was a mutuality there. They got their ass out of jail, when they would do these protests and stuff down here. So there was a mutual sharing of information and understanding. And then what happens is, after a while, if we keep doing this mutual aid thing right, we will be self-organized to self-govern. That's a whole other conversation. I'm gonna leave that right there.
Oh yeah, that's a nice session. Stay tuned. Thank you, Manjati. Yes, so much good advice in there. Know your faults. Get to know your faults for real. Starts with the relationships. Can't miss it. Can't. And listen and remember the history, right? Like, it really helps me to know that there are people who have done it, who have been here and done it, especially generations ago. So thank you for bringing them to light and honoring them in this space. Awesome. Lilith, will you please tell us, what advice do you have for someone, city or country, wanting to get started on a mutual aid project?
So I would say that it is simultaneously very important to do like if you see a need, or if you are like really interested in doing some kind of project, like I think you should do the research into your community and see if there is already someone who's doing this work that you can tap into. We don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. That being said, you can do whatever. I think like with mutual aid, that's the thing about it, and that's like what drew me to it, and why like how I view mutual aid is rooted in anarchist principles, is that like, if you want to start something, as long as it is corresponds with a set of principles, you're probably not doing it wrong. You're probably not making a mistake, as long as you are doing the work of checking yourself and really evaluating what your project is. And all of you are smart. If you can figure out how best to do something on your own, and it's not going to be like, you're not going to wreck something. And there's lots of small but like incredibly effective things that you can do to just immediately affect your community. And like a free pantry is just a great idea. They're easy to maintain, they're super effective. Even if your organization has to front the money to stock it for the first little bit, the people will find it. And it will eventually become like a self-sustaining like environment where people are putting in, people are taking out. A free little library is something really easy. A clothes closet is really easy. Like the reality is that it's actually very simple and that most people can do it, even if you want to start on a very small scale. And in terms of like the nuts and bolts of funding, I think the internet is super powerful. And that, even in the very ruralest places in America, we have a lot of times access to the internet, and you can make something that rich people in New York want to put money towards. And I think like maybe that sounds contrived or whatever, but we have goals, and like there are people who want to send money, so let them send money. And I think for us, like Patreon, that website has been a lifesaver. We have paid for basically everything that we've ever needed through Patreon, with promoting it very small, like not even really having to promote it that much. So yeah, like if funding is an issue, and it's maybe an issue because you haven't identified your folks in your immediate community yet, or there isn't a lot of support for your political views like in a small community, then like look to the internet, because it can really be a good resource for funding specifically. And also I guess like I would just say, holding like physical space for intentionally anti-capitalist, intentionally anti-racist, intentionally queer affirming beliefs is super duper 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 important. It's important in Birmingham, and like this is the bluest part of the state, bluest, like most progressive part of the state. So think about how important that is in communities that are viewed as being more red. Though, like, of course, like rural communities have a lot of radicalism in them already. My wife lived in Ecuador for a couple of years in her like early 20s, and one of the things that she saw there that had a big impact on her is that the smallest of rural communities would have a building that was the Communist Party headquarters of that community. And you'd be like in the middle of nowhere. Like you'd be like on top of a mountain or like in the jungle. Like and there would be a building that would be painted like red and black and be like that community's Communist Party headquarters. And I think like something like that is a really important thing to do in America as well. Like being like, this is intentionally leftist space. And I think that that would be even more impactful in smaller communities too. So I think that's the advice that I have.
Yes. So much good stuff, Lilith. Golly. Like, yeah, it's simple. Tap into something that already exists if you can. It don't have to be too complicated. Rural folks like are showing up, can show up. Oh, and thank you for for bringing up the importance of having rad spaces in small communities and big communities. That is worth its weight in gold, right? So thank you. Golly. Oh, I wish we could go all night, y'all. So we only got about 5 minutes, but definitely want to hear from our remaining two panelists, their advice. Bryn, if you will, for folks wanting to get involved in mutual aid.
Yeah, so bouncing off what Lilith said, the internet is your friend. You may be the only person in your community, but you might not be the only person in a rural community that wants to do what you want to do. Even in the fridge world, we've reached out to other cities, you know, if we've come across an issue, just like for advice. I mean, everybody is just like really cool when it comes down to it. Like everybody's just like down to be like, hey, this is how we've dealt with something, you know. So don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to like reach out to people within your community. There's strength in numbers. You don't have to be the person that starts something. You don't have to be the person that gets the credit for something. Like really, you know, check your biases, make sure that you're doing something like to intentionally support a community, not just because like you want to feel good about it. Be sure to check in with the community that you're serving and not just make assumptions and just like not going in and being like, oh, this is what we think you need. Like ideally have someone from the community that you're serving at your table, you know, lift their voices and have them actually participate with your movement. And if you are paying for a service, to try to look at opportunities where, you know, the folks that are necessarily like offering services might not be the voices that you want to amplify. So if you do have an opportunity to compensate like someone from the BIPOC community that can do web design or artistry or any sort of like management or social media management, and like the people that are offering, it is cool to take advantage of free services, but try to see like where you can amplify the voices like behind the movement that you're really trying to support.
Yes, 100%. Like mutual aid, not in just your work, but in your organizational practices, right? We got to remember that 100% all throughout. So, and also, yes, thank you both, Brandon and Lilith, for reminding us of the power of the internet and what it can accomplish, especially when it comes to getting that extra support that might not be immediately visible at the get-go, right? In the process of building it. And making sure community members are always at the table. And it's who we are. We are the community, right? Thank you so much, Bryn. Beautiful, beautiful. All right, Penny, please, if you will, finish us out with some advice.
I don't feel like I have anything to add, and I honestly want to know if anybody has questions. like, because I know we don't have much time left. So everybody said awesome stuff. And let's take questions if we've got time.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. If anyone has any questions, you can ask one person or the whole panel. Please just share them in the chat. And definitely don't get off yet because we have a very special surprise before we go. So definitely stay on. Love special surprises. But any questions before we close out today? You can take yourself off mute if you like. Inquiring minds want to know your question. Yeah, I just want to get to the surprise. Me too.
Okay.
Yes.
If nobody has a question, I'll go ahead and add my advice because I know I think you asked about funding, and Lilith is right that there's like the internet's a great way to get funding, but I think also, we just started our Patreon like a week ago or 2 weeks ago. We haven't even told anybody about it. So Birmingham Mutual Aid has been like just doing it without money for like the last 8.5 months. And if you are tenacious and you have time, which I'm really lucky to have, it's possible. Lilith and Asher and I have joked like, an anarchist is always going to find free furniture. So like if you, like want a little free pantry, it will like keep your eye on the side of the road, keep your eye on Facebook Marketplace, keep it on Craigslist. Like you don't have to buy one. And you just like, I guess like build up social capital by showing your works. Like do the work and people are going to come to you and they are going to start participating and they are going to start giving you things because they want to be a part of something. So, you don't necessarily need money to start. If that's like what your barrier is and what makes you feel not empowered to just like go for it, there's so many creative ways to do what you want to do and like what you want to believe in. And I know like we have all done it without money as well. Money's awesome. Like give us money because we need to give money to people, but also like we can do a lot without it. So that's my advice since nobody had a question.
Yeah, thank you. You ain't got to get a grant, right? Just make it happen.
They're not going to give us grants anyways because we're not nonprofits.
Woo, that's a whole nother session, y'all. All right, that's gonna be next time too. Wow, golly, thank y'all so much. This was just like better than I could have imagined. Y'all are just such bright stars in our Alabama and Southern night sky. So thank you. And like I said, we do have a wonderful little surprise. So this session was recorded by a graphic note taker. And so we have some graphic notes to share from our session, which is super, super rad. We're really excited and grateful to Sarah. Thank you so much, Sarah, for doing that for us and offering that gift up. And I'm gonna put on screen sharing for you. So if you'd like to share your screen and show us what's been the business.
Hi, Sav. Do you mind giving my iPad screen sharing, and I will be happy to share. It's just that iPad there.
Yes, I believe you're a co-host, and then screen sharing should be on for all. Is that working? Think about y'all. There we go. All right. Oh, what? Whoa.
Whoa, that's crucial. Oh, that's so crucial.
Like the note.
Oh, yo, these is this joint.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. What a beautiful
Oh,
um
wow.
wow. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for bringing that to us. Holy cow. Well, while you're feasting your eyes on this beautiful piece of art, I just want to thank y'all again so much. Thank you, Sarah, for this wonderful piece of work. Thank you to our panelists, Najati, Penny, Lilith, Bryn. Thank you to everyone who came. My Gadsden folks, I see y'all, appreciate y'all showing up. Thank you to Alice for putting it on, Mariam, staff, everybody here, thank y'all. Sarah Jane, Youth Council showing up. Y'all should join ASAN. Join ASAN because it's rad and does stuff like this. We are a membership-led organization. That is really key to us. This is about community. So definitely want y'all to consider, if you're not already a member, definitely just check it out. Check us out. Thank you for sharing the space with us tonight. We are gonna give a little satisfaction poll just to make sure y'all are pleased with how everything went. So I'm gonna launch that. I'm sorry, Ruby, I did your job for you. I got a little over anxious, but I'm just excited and so grateful for all y'all again for coming tonight. I hope you enjoy the rest of the forum. We got so much good stuff. The youth forum, this was our launch event. So really happy to be supporting intergenerational agriculture and so much more over the next week or so. So yes, I'll leave y'all to enjoy your evenings. Wow, thank y'all so much. We'll see you soon.